So Tony, can you give us a little intro about yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. Thanks. Yes, I'm Tony Sabaj. I'm currently the head of engineering for Checkpoint in our channel organization. Been at Checkpoint for a long time in a variety of different sales and sales engineering roles. And prior to that, I was at a startup where we built a managed security service platform. And prior to that, I started my career at Arthur Andersen when Arthur Andersen and Andersen Consulting were one big happy family many, many years ago.
So before we started this, we were talking, you and I were just talking, and you said that you cover the Western Hemisphere. So that is, can you give me the scale of what that really is?
Yeah, so I get the advantage of working with our partners. So partners like SynerComm, and I help bring Checkpoint products to market through our partners since we're a 100% channel organization. We only sell through partners like SynerComm. So I get to work with them and integrate our solutions into their go-to-market strategies to help secure our joint customers.
So what does that mean when you're dealing with partners and customers in different countries? How do you get involved with that?
I also have an advantage of having, access to not only my own team, but also the rest of Checkpoint. So a lot of times I'll rely on, our local experts, especially when you're talking about different countries and different languages, being able to use them as support. And I'm coming in as, more of a program manager and coming up with some of the larger ideas that then we can implement locally, because every market, even within the U.S. and Canada, is different than elsewhere in the country.
Okay. So let's put a little context around that, because Tony's not divulging all of the information here. He's been with Checkpoint for 20 years, is it?
Yeah,
Over
just
20
about.
years?
Just about.
So talk to us a little bit about your evolution inside Checkpoint, and that'll get us to today, and we can kind of dive into where the industry's going.
I've been working with Checkpoint as a product since about 1996. So with Arthur Andersen, we were one of the big first enterprise users of Checkpoint when it was a very young company. And then I went to a partner for a few years where we built a managed security platform, and Checkpoint was part of that. And then when that company was sold, I consulted for 6 months, which is not on my resume, but then came to Checkpoint and have done a variety of different jobs at Checkpoint. So I was a local engineer in the Chicago market, and then I was managing the Chicago office that covered Illinois and Wisconsin. So I spent many, many, many nights and days in Wisconsin with SynerComm customers. And then I moved into more of a sales role around our data security products for a few years. And then when we rebuilt our internal channel organization, I came back to manage the engineers of our channel organization. I've been doing that for the last 8 or 9 years, and we've built it from, I had a team of 3 people when I started, and now I've got a team of about 40 people, mainly covering U.S. and Canada. We rely on some of our local experts outside of U.S. and Canada to do some of the feet on the street stuff in some of the countries where I don't speak the language. So,
wow, like Canada?
Like Canada, yes. I do speak a little bit of French that I do get to use when I go to Quebec. So, yeah.
Well, okay, so that's a lot, and not to date my co-host here, Kirk, and yourself, but you probably both have seen a lot of trends over the years. So let's talk about where you guys are both seeing the growth in the security industry over the next couple years.
Yeah, so really what we see, and this was actually a topic of my talk today at your conference, was really that shift from the traditional data center into a multi and hybrid cloud strategy, and not just the lift and shift of taking servers from a data center into a public cloud environment like AWS or Azure or GCP, but really that real agile cloud architecture of people really, starting to use things like functions and platform as a service, and not just running their stuff in a different data center that happens to be cloud-based. And that's really the biggest shift that I've seen, starting probably 3 or 4 years ago and very much accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic. We would have gotten there eventually, but the pandemic has forced everybody's hands to move to the cloud faster because it is more agile and people aren't sitting in data centers anymore. And that's the biggest growth and the biggest opportunities and also the biggest challenges that I'm seeing specifically in the security market.
Anything from like the work at home perspective are you seeing there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as part of that cloud strategy, it's not just moving servers from my data center and applications into the cloud, but now all of your users are not in an office anymore. They're not behind a traditional security gateway or firewall or proxy or however customers, organizations implemented their security. We now have to move security away from being network centric and move security closer to the end users and closer to the applications that you're protecting and less about the data as it's in transit because we don't know where that data is going. They could be just going over VPNs. They could just be going over the internet to get to mail applications like Microsoft Office 365 or any of the cloud-based services. And that's been another challenge as people move to the cloud is getting that security closer to the end users and closer to the applications and less about the transit network in the middle.
And how do the tools have to change when they move from the data center to the cloud, the security tools?
Yeah, so the biggest change that I see is traditionally, and I say traditionally going back, 10 years or so, we implemented security by, having devices on a network that were inspecting traffic on a network. And we were able to look at that traffic and look at it from a soup to nuts, from a low-level networking perspective all the way up to the application layer. But now that users and applications are remote and we don't necessarily know where any of them are going to be at any time, we've kind of lost that ability to have an intermediary device that's doing your security. And we're seeing a lot more focus on endpoint security and not just application security, but security that's integrated into the application. So more API-based security and less network-based security.
Yep, that makes sense. That's a huge paradigm shift.
Yeah.
And I know that Checkpoint has some unique advantages, I think, in the Azure cloud. You mentioned some of the things that Checkpoint can do that maybe some of their competitors can't, and why would you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of to make a real general statement, I think two of Checkpoint's biggest competitive advantages in the market is one, we're a software company at the end of the day. So it's very easy for us to take our security and move it almost into any environment, whether it's an endpoint, whether it's running in the cloud, whether it's specific integrations with other people's hardware. We're a software company and all of our security is done via software. So we can port our security anywhere. The other big advantage is that everything that Checkpoint does is actually powered by a cloud service, whether you're actually providing cloud security or not, that is sending real time, and by real time, like multiple times a second, updates to all of our solutions for the latest threats and the latest engine updates, and our AI engine updates are constantly being increased across our entire customer base without upgrading to a new product or installing policy. If you're a Checkpoint customer, that's something that you do. All of these updates and all of these new protections get automatically added, and new intelligence get automatically added, and then we bring it all back to the cloud to be able to do correlation across all of our customers with the addition of our own research from our partners, research from third parties that we bring in, and we call it our threat cloud that powers everything that we do, regardless of whether it's protecting the cloud or not.
That's one of the benefits, obviously, of a system solution versus maybe
exactly.
point
The more the
solutions.
platform play than the point product solution.
Correct. Okay, good.
So you're talking about software and being a software company and how that creates a lot of flexibility in the way that you go to market and the way you come to your solutions. So what does that mean as the industry as a whole when we're trying to fight cybercrime? It's kind of a two-part question. So how does Checkpoint stay on top of where cybercrimes are going, and then how does the industry kind of stay on top of where cybercrimes are going?
Yeah. So from a Checkpoint perspective, obviously we're a large company. We have over 5,000 employees. Of those employees, we have about half are just in R&D. So about half of our company is dedicated to R&D, and within our R&D organization, we have a team of I'm gonna guesstimate, but it's between 300 and 500 people that are just security researchers. They don't create product, they don't write code. If they do, they're doing it for security research, and that research is one of the things that powers our threat cloud, is our own research. So we like to think like the cyber criminals, and we have people, masquerading on the dark web and getting information and developing new AI engines to counteract the ever-changing, cyber crime landscape. So that's one of the things that we do specifically as Checkpoint. I think as an industry, obviously besides buying Checkpoint products, what an industry can do, from protecting against cyber criminals is actually quite simple. Is cyber criminals are going to go after the low-hanging fruit. There's always going to be the people that are specifically trying to attack a specific organization to get, specific intellectual property, or do it from a hacktivism standpoint of, bringing down an organization to make a statement. But most of your cybercrime out there is truly just a business these days. And they're going to go after the most vulnerable. So it's, if you leave your car unlocked in your driveway, there's a better chance your car is going to get broken into than if you just lock the doors. And I think we as a industry and, as just a connected society need to make sure that, to make a very obvious statement, that we're just locking our doors, that we're taking care of the low-hanging fruit, the known vulnerabilities, that we're protecting against those, that we're putting in the basic controls, that we're not leaving things wide open. If you look at, there's a bunch of studies and, research out there, but 80% of most of the security vulnerabilities or attacks out there are exploited by known vulnerabilities and misconfigurations by users. So part of what we do to address that is not only have this platform play that you talked about, but also we unify the management of all of that into one place. So there's less of a chance we can make the users of our solutions more effective of preventing some of this really easy stuff that lots of vendors can protect against the easy stuff, but we make it even easier to protect against the easier stuff, in addition to all the, the really crazy AI stuff that we do to protect against the zero-day types of threats, but really protecting against that low-hanging fruit, the easy stuff, locking your car doors in your driveway, and that's probably one of the biggest things.
Yeah, everybody's got an AI story, because I think it's really key to intelligent automation is machine learning and AI. And is there anything you can say specifically about Checkpoint and how they play in that game?
No, absolutely. So as I said, all of our products have different security engines in them, and many of them are based off of true artificial intelligence. And actually just had this conversation with our VP of Research and Development, Dr. Dorit Dorr, who is maybe the smartest person I've ever met in my entire life. And she's been at Checkpoint longer than I have. And one of the things is we've kind of moved from, there's sort of this sort of classical machine learning, which is where you train an algorithm and you get an output. And we've moved more from that type of AI and machine learning to more neural networks, where we connect multiple AI engines together and it actually builds its own algorithms and updates itself automatically. And when we made that shift, so Checkpoint's always been a prevention-first company, and we take very much pride in preventing and not just telling you something bad happened and then say, go clean it up. We want to prevent it. And as we made that switch from classical machine learning to more neural network AI engines, we not only increased our best-in-industry security efficiency by 30%, but more importantly, we decreased our false positives by 90%. And that's almost as important as stopping it, is not alerting you on things that aren't really issues. I mean, if you go back to multiple, famous attacks, even go back to the Target attack of multiple years ago. Now, Target was using some of our competitor solutions and some of Checkpoint's, basic network security solutions. And actually one of our competitors that Target was using, actually caught the attack that actually caused the initial target attack. But because it was so busy and noisy, they just ignored it. And by reducing those false positives, when our solutions alert on something, you can take it seriously, and then we even take a step further and we'll do forensics on that because we are bringing all that information back to the cloud. So when something triggers, we can go back and say, hey, based on our research, this is a targeted attack against your organization, not just some signature or anomaly that we've seen on a network.
So yeah, it's the intelligence. Like it's the context that without affecting the user performance, taking the chain and then making the case, so adaptive security models, so that you can actually apply a little more restrictive policies without actually breaking things, which is ultimately what people
You can turn the security on without
having to worry about
exactly
all these false positives that you have to look into. So that's great. So if you had to, what do you think the biggest developments will be in the industry in general, and just in the platform world over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think that the biggest trends are going to continue to be this move to the cloud. And again, not just the lift and shift of, I've got a database server in my on-premise data center, and now I'm just going to virtualize it and run it in Azure or AWS or GCP. But it's really moving to more of an agile cloud environment where you're using things like containers and functions, and you're no longer just running servers in the cloud. You're just putting data and users, and you're using the agility of the cloud to be able to get access to that data and that applications, and the security needs to follow that same trend.
It's a whole new paradigm when you have functions over here and maybe the core application and it's not like a traditional firewall where you're just watching the ports go through.
Exactly. And we lose that visibility now. We can't look at things from a network 3 through 7 perspective anymore. We have to look at it from an application and API perspective. And again, because we're software, we can actually just monitor those API calls, and we can insert ourselves into web front ends to be able to look at that without changing the architecture. It's that whole DevOps or DevSecOps conversation of actually putting the security into the development process and being able to scan code before it's even in production and say, hey, there's security issues in this, and have it be continuous and not just security as a point in time or an intermediary step. Actually build security into the development of cloud-based applications, and that's very much where we're moving to also.
Great, yeah.
What I'd like to do is kind of wrap this up is we're talking about this move to the cloud, right? Everyone's talking about it, and I've been around for a while too, maybe not as long as you guys have been around, but I've been around for a while, and everyone's talking about go to the cloud, go to the cloud, go to the cloud. And it seemed like it was almost like just vendor kind of jargon, right? Like SD whatever. Like it's like that all started. But after talking to you, it's like it's here, it's now. Now, I know you mentioned that COVID kind of accelerated that, but where is your view on where we are on this curve? Like if this is like we're about to kind of do a hockey stick here, how far up this curve are we?
I think we're nearing the peak of it. And when we say moving to the cloud, we're not just saying moving to Azure or AWS or GCP or Oracle or Alibaba, depending on what you're doing, but also utilizing cloud services like Office 365 or Salesforce or, Apple Music or Spotify. I used to have a 3,000 CD collection. I still have it, but it hasn't grown in 15 years. So everything is moving to the cloud, whether you know it or not. Office 360, people don't buy Microsoft Word anymore. They're basically renting it from Microsoft, and storage is being delivered from the cloud. So it's not just the public cloud infrastructure. You're starting to see SaaS-based security as a service, software as a service. You're also seeing, and I think once we reach the top, we'll see a push back towards on-prem, but with hybrid cloud infrastructure. So something like Azure Stack, where I can run the Azure software in my own environment, get that cloud agility without having to actually have my stuff sitting in Microsoft. And I can literally drag and drop applications from my own data center into Azure, or same thing with AWS Outposts, do the same type of thing. So I think we'll see a push back towards some more on-prem stuff, I think, when we get back to some semblance of normal.
And you have the operational technologies and things that are going to always remain on-prem because that's where the things are built. So cloud can aggregate data very well.
Right.
but there's still going to be local processing to
Yeah,
do all this,
and-
and you have to secure that.
And you still have, you still always going to have on-prem stuff, especially if we didn't talk a whole lot about IoT security, but if you have devices that you need to secure that are in a plant or in a hospital or, in a power generation station, or even just, if we look around this room, there's IP camera there, there's a IP fire alarm there.
God knows what that is.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. Something spying on us. It's got a flashing red light. I'm not sure
Right,
what
exactly.
it is. But this stuff needs to be secured because it's super vulnerable because you can't update this kind of stuff. So there's always going to be on-prem security. You're always going to have people in offices at the end of the day that still need to be secured. But the whole pandemic has really pushed what can go to the cloud